Today on the Rock Feed podcast, we're joined by a very special guest celebrating his return to Dream Theater. The new album Parasomnia is out now. One of the most skilled and influential drummers in the game. It's an honor to have you, ladies and gentlemen. Mike Portnoy, how you doing today?
Good. How you doing, man?
Doing fantastic, and so stoked to have you here on the podcast. I've wanted to have you here on the channel for some time, so it's an honor to have you. And the new record is fantastic. Now, you returned to the stage with the band after 14 years late last year at the O2 in London. First of all, what a hell of a venue to come back at. What did that feel like, taking the stage again with your brothers in the band after so many years?
It was terrifying. I mean, a lot of times you want to start off a tour with maybe a warm-up show or whatever like that. But yeah, we came out of the gates playing to 10,000 people at the O2 Arena in London. So yeah, we had to hit the ground running, and luckily we were rehearsed and prepared. So I think we actually pulled it off, and it was an unbelievable night. One of the most memorable shows of my whole career, for sure.
I got to tell you, and I know that the fans went nuts when your return was announced. When did you find out that you were going to be returning to the fold in the band after such a long time away?
Well, it was late 2023 when the conversations began. It started with John Petrucci and myself talking about it, and then a little further in, having the whole band all get together and talk about it. But yeah, I was actually on the road with the Winery Dogs when we were having the conversations. So yeah, it was all mainly done with conference calls and Zoom calls and stuff like that. The five of us weren't actually in the same room together until we met up to start the album in February of last year.
And what's it like getting back into the room again, recording this record, Parasomnia, which, man, I've listened to it in my home studio, but I've also car tested it. And in both of these environments, the record sounds absolutely fantastic. And, what was that like, stepping into the studio once again?
It was a little surreal, to be honest, because it had been such a long time. But honestly, it was only when we would actually think about it did it feel like, shocking. It really, on the surface, was incredibly natural, and it felt like no time had passed. It really just felt like it was the next day, after doing the Black Clouds album 15 years earlier. But it really was incredibly, normal. It really just felt, normal and right. Like no time had passed.
I mean, you have such a musical chemistry, so I could totally understand that. You are just an unbelievably talented drummer. It's so impressive. I love seeing people at the top of their game, and you are certainly at that. And, going back to the early days what was that artist or moment, if you can remember, that really inspires you to pick up the drumsticks and pursue this?
Well, there was stages, the early stages. It was guys like Keith Moon and John Bonham. Seeing Keith Moon perform in the movie The Kids Are All Right, that blew my mind. I never seen a drummer with that much charisma and personality. But even guys like Ringo Starr, Ringo was a big part of the chemistry of the Beatles, or guys like Peter Criss. I like seeing drummers that were an important, character in their band. And so those were the early guys. And then once I got a little more serious about drumming itself and my drum kit and trying to evolve more as a progressive drummer, it was Neil Peart that really changed the game for me. He was my big hero in my early teens when I was really developing into more progressive styles.
And was Russian influence for all of the guys in the band?
Absolutely. They were the common ground between the three of us, myself, John Petrucci, and John Mayung. When we formed the band at Berklee back in '85, Rush was like our blueprint. It was really kind of Rush mixed with Iron Maiden. Those were the big two when we formed the band, and that was really the blueprint from where Dream Theater was born.
And do you remember the first memorable show that you went to? Was there a band in particular that you saw live? For me, there's just those memories.
The big three for me when I was a kid, I saw George Harrison in 1974. I was only 7 years old, so that being like the first rock concert was obviously huge. Then a few years later, I saw Paul McCartney and Wings on the Wings Over America tour in '76. And then the big one, the one that really made its mark on me was when I saw Kiss in 1977 at Madison Square Garden on the Alive 2 tour. And that was the one that like really made its mark on me.
Man, I mean, that's a hell of a run. So you're big into the Beatles, I'm assuming.
Oh yeah, yeah, number one for me.
Yeah, it's just incredible to see the influence and the impact that they've had, and I just think that Kiss as well, from a theatrical standpoint with the band too, like the live performance they put on. I hadn't seen them up until a few years ago, and I saw them on their farewell tour, and I was shocked by the production that they brought, and even up to the very end, there was just an
Yeah.
over the top.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
I mean, and I can just imagine. Sorry, go ahead.
If you were a young child, I was around 10 years old in the mid '70s, and if you were around back then, the impact that Kiss had on kids our age back then, they were like superheroes. There was no band like that. They were kind of taking the formula of the Beatles, but taking it into a more of a superhero kind of larger than life hard rock, heavy metal kind of world. And yeah, for me as a 10-year-old kid at that point in the mid '70s, it was just transforming.
And so y'all are out there on the road right now. The tour looks absolutely incredible. How has it been? I'm sure that you're getting feedback from fans as well, just getting their mind blown at these shows. How has it been right now in the current run? I know there was an illness. It seems like this time of year, there's a lot of bands, unfortunately, that are getting sick as well. But other than that, how has it been?
Other than that, which was unfortunate, we had to postpone a show a few days ago in Atlanta. But besides that, this whole tour has been absolutely the biggest and the best that Dream Theater has ever done. And, we did 2 months in Europe back in October, November. Then we did a run through South America in December. And those were all like arena shows, 10,000 seat arenas, sold out. And now here in America, we're doing the biggest numbers that the band has seen in America. So, yeah, the excitement is pretty obvious. I mean, obviously the fans are really coming out in droves and supporting this tour and the reunion and the excitement of the reunion of this lineup. It's been amazing. I mean, just you look into the audience and it's just all smiles and tears of joy and people. There's a lot of old fans that haven't seen this lineup together in like 15 years. And then there's a lot of young fans that never saw this lineup together. So it's really been very exciting.
I remember maybe it was a couple years ago, but I remember posting about this because I thought it was cool. You went out to a Dream Theater show and you weren't playing. I don't know if you had ever done that prior, but I can't imagine. That's got to be sort of an odd experience to watch a band live that you formerly played in. Now, of course, you're back. But what is that like watching them play and you're not up on stage with them? Is it like
it was really weird, and it was something that I had dreamed about so many times. I had a lot of dreams when I was out of the band. I had a lot of dreams about reuniting and being back up there. But there was also a lot of times where I had dreams of just going to see the band without me. So I wasn't sure how I would react, but honestly, it was not as awkward as I thought it would be. It was nice seeing the guys and seeing the crew guys and the fans, and everybody was so welcoming and loving, and so everybody made me feel very comfortable in what could have been an uncomfortable situation.
What did your friends and family say when you told them that you're coming back to the band after all these years?
Everybody's been so supportive and so excited about it. Even, all the time I was out of the band, I formed 27 different bands or whatever. I had all these different side projects and different bands. Even all of the members of those bands, when I broke the news to them, they were all so supportive. They were like, no, this has to happen. This is important. Yes. This is meant to be, and you got to do it. So it's been right all across the board. Everybody's been just so excited about it.
I mean, and it's not just important for you and the band, but it's important for the genre as well. I mean, it's just makes so much sense. And talking about, touring internationally, I always find it so interesting because, it's one thing to have a big band over here like you do, but when you take things worldwide and you're talking about selling out arenas in Europe and in South America, one of the things I hear, particularly with metal from artists that I talk to is, the American fans are great. They're diehards. They're wonderful. But some of these countries over like in Europe as well, they're really wild and they really ride for the band. Would you say that maybe, is there a country in particular where you say maybe the fans ride the most for Dream Theater?
South America for sure is the craziest. And there's several countries. I mean, there's a lot of countries down there that we play, but like Argentina, Chile, and Brazil, those three in particular are always insane.
Wow.
Like literally you just see the whole floor moving, it's just a sea of people that are just like bouncing up and down and so passionate and loving. And that's not to take away from an American audience.
Of course.
We're tonight here in Houston. I'm sure it's going to be an amazing show with great fans, but they just react differently. So there's a lot of places overseas or luckily Dream Theater has always been a global band. Even from the very, very beginning when we started touring in the early 90s, we always made it a point to spend a lot of time developing these other markets over in Europe or down in South America or Australia or Japan or Asia. People in America don't realize it's a big world out there, and there's a lot of great fans all across the globe.
Yes, and that's one of the things that I think people don't realize compared to other genres. Like, country music isn't necessarily, which I'm a fan of, country music isn't huge in, South America, et cetera. But, rock and metal definitely are. And it's almost like a meme or a cliche when, come to Brazil. But those fans are so passionate about heavy metal. So I'm not surprised. I've heard so many people say just like those videos of like Pantera playing down there and they're just like you said, they're just shaking the floor. So it's just absolutely incredible. You've had so much history over the course of your career and you've accomplished so much and continue to do so. If you could go back and relive any moment in your career, what would you say it would be?
Oh man. I don't know. I mean, there's been so many highlights. You mentioned the tour kickoff, the first reunion show at the O2 in London. That was surely a special one. The first time we played Radio City Music Hall, we filmed it for the Score DVD. That was amazing. And we're getting to play there again next month. It's sold out. So I look forward to revisiting there. We get to revisit it. There's been so many moments like that, playing the Budokan in Japan, playing Madison Square Garden in New York. So many. I have so much gratitude for this incredible ride that I've had and that the band has had. It's been really incredible.
Can you think of, any, because to have gotten as far as you've gotten, at least from the people that I've spoken to, you don't get this far and you don't become as talented as you are without being a true fan and student of the game as well. Obviously, like you can't just get that good and not truly love it. Is there any moment that stands out to you meeting one of your music heroes? You're a music hero of so many yourself, but.
Well, I'll always be the biggest music fan. I'll always be that 13-year-old kid listening to Kiss, like we were just talking about. That's still there in me.
Yes.
And I've been fortunate to have met everybody. I mean, any band I could think of, any musician I could think of that I've ever wanted to meet, I have been blessed to have met. So obviously the big ones for me were Ringo and Paul McCartney. I had great experiences with both of those guys. My experience with Paul McCartney, I was at a private party of his that I was fortunate to be invited to. And you look around the room and there was a who's who of everybody, Paul Simon, Lorne Michaels, Cameron Diaz, Fred Armisen. I mean, everybody was there. And Paul went to each and every person in the room and came over to me and my daughter, didn't even know who I was for that matter, but was still extending himself. We spent about 10 minutes chit-chatting, just me, him, and my daughter. Wow. And he was engaging me in conversation. And that was a real lesson right there. Like here you have the biggest musician on the planet, and he's still like that. He's still open and giving. And there's a lot of people in the industry I've seen like that. Dave Grohl's definitely one of those kind of people. Lars Ulrich is one of those kind of people. Like, the first time I brought my son to see Metallica, Lars hooked us up with the tickets, and Lars literally sent for my son. Once the show began, he sent his assistant up to grab my son and bring him down to watch the show from the drum kit. So you see people like Lars or Dave Grohl or Paul McCartney that are so huge but still have that excitement and energy, and they're still giving. It's inspiring. It teaches you a lesson that, you want to be that kind of a musician to the fans.
I love that. And I've certainly, had some experiences like that too, meeting people, and you're just impressed. And I think the takeaway too is you realize a lot of these artists get to where they're at from their talent, but also, being a good person and their hospitality and all of that as well. I just think, what advice would you have? I always feel like there's not enough bands starting these days. I think there's so many other distractions in society. There's video games, there's all this different technology, and I always want more people to start bands. What advice would you have for an artist that was really trying to pursue this professionally, that wanted to start a band and get into this?
Well, my fear is that so many young musicians are going to get scared out of doing this for a living because it's so hard to make money at music these days, because now everybody expects music to just be given away for free. So there's no money in the albums themselves. So everybody has to go on the road and charge expensive tickets in order to somehow get by and be able to do it. So my fear is that a lot of young artists are not going to be given the opportunity to really pursue their talents because it's become so difficult to do it for a living. But that being said, with that comes the other side of the coin, where you can be a young musician and get your music out there to the whole world on your own because of the internet and social media. Like when Dream Theater was starting 30 plus years ago in the 80s and 90s, you had to have a record deal. You had to be on MTV. You had to have a budget in order to be able to record your music. These days, you don't need that. You can record an album in your bedroom and put it out there on the internet for the entire world to hear. So that is one of the good aspects of the internet that has made it very, very easy for an artist to get their music out there. But I just hope that they're encouraged to stick with it because it's so hard to make a living at it these days.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I think you're absolutely spot on. And it is such a challenge. And I don't know that people really realize how expensive it is to tour, down to, the transportation, all of that stuff.
The gas, just the gas for a bus or a van, even if you're, touring in a van, the expenses are outrageous. That's why most bands, first of all, have to charge more money for their tickets. And second of all, they have to do like VIP meet and greets and things like that, just because it's the only way that they could actually survive on the road and be able to do it.
Oh, it definitely, and it takes so much creativity to, figure out a way to make it work. And I just couldn't agree more with what you're saying. It's a very serious problem. Tens of thousands of dollars a month just to have a bus, or even less than a bus. You have extremely expensive fees, that's for sure. Talking about the name Parasomnia, which I think is so interesting because sleep itself is such an interesting idea that how did y'all come up with that name? And, is this something that anyone in the band has dealt with?
Well, look at the name of this band, Dream Theater. It was a natural. Yeah. It was a natural that we would write an album based on, this topic, but it was something that John Petrucci had heard and had done a little investigating into, and found the topic interesting. So he presented it to us, and we all thought it was a good idea. So we used that as a jumping off point. But no, none of us have ever really dealt with them personally. So all the lyrics that we wrote were kind of fictitious. We would have to do a little research into these different parasomnic activities. And, we learned a little bit about it, and we all got to write kind of different stories within this common thread.
It's a fascinating subject. And I mean, even like consciousness itself, it's something we fully don't understand. And we're all walking around in this extremely complex world. And it's crazy to think about, like the existence itself is crazy to think about. In music, you get a lot of advice from people. What would you say some of the best advice you've ever received was?
Well, I think for us to stick to our guns, we went through some real rough patches early on in our career with, lineup changes and bad record deals and bad management.
Mhm.
And there were so many periods that this band could have broken up, especially the period before Images and Words and the period before Scenes from a Memory. And in both of those cases, we stuck to our guns and hung in there for years and ended up making two groundbreaking albums that really changed our career. Both of those albums really, really were very important for us, and they easily could have not been made if we would have just given up. So early on, we learned to stick to our guns, and no matter how many times you get kicked down, you got to brush yourself off and get back up and just stick at it. And if you persevere and if you believe in it for long enough, it will come together and work out.
And would you describe yourself, especially when the band was starting, were you like an extremely determined person? You were not going to be deterred from this dream at all?
Yeah, all of us were. We had this very common vision of what this band was, and we knew that we had a very special chemistry with each other. And even right from the very beginning, when it was just the three of us at Berklee College of Music back in '85, it was myself, John Petrucci, and John Mayung. We, even within the second semester of college, we had to make the decision to leave Berklee and go back home just to pursue the band. And that shows right there how much we believed in it. And we, and we luckily had the support of our families to get behind us and get behind that decision. And, we were just determined, and we persevered, and we went through a lot of tough times, but here we are 40 years later,
I don't think you can get to where you've gotten without being that way. That's just like what I've seen. You have to be extremely determined. It can't be something that you're just kind of doing on the side. You have to jump in, which is, you guys left the school, and it's a tremendous, Berklee's amazing, was there any, when you told your family, like, was there any, like, are you sure you're leaving?
Oh, yeah,
school?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the big jokes is that we've talked about in other interviews, but for myself and for John Petrucci as well, we had to really convince our parents to let us go to Berklee to begin with, because they wanted us to go to a more traditional college. So it took a lot of persuading to get them to convince them that we wanted to go to a music college. So we finally do. And then 2 semesters later, we break the news to them that we're now dropping out to pursue the band.
Wow.
But luckily we came from really good families that supported us.
Well, I think it's a testament to where you've ended up. And, I know you're very busy, so I don't want to take up too much of your time, but what an honor it is to have you here on the podcast. I've wanted to have you as a guest for a while. Truly one of the best in the game, Mike Portnoy. The new record, Parasomnia, link to it in the description down below. If you haven't heard it yet, strongly recommend it. It just came out. Mike, thank you so much for being here. It's a true honor to have you.
My pleasure. Thanks, man.
Thank you.